By the early months of 1939, Germany had achieved a massive geopolitical expansion without an open declaration of war. This data comparing Germany's baseline in 1936 to its peak in 1939 shows the scale of that growth. The population had grown by over 10 million people, supported by a supercharged economy and an industrial base turning out goods at a staggering pace. Alongside this economic surge, the German military had been completely rebuilt. The restrictive caps placed on their armed forces following the First World War had been discarded. In 3 years, the leadership in Berlin had dismantled the terms of the Treaty of Versailles that had bound the nation for nearly 2 decades. Crucially, the Western powers of Britain and France had accepted this new reality. The memory of the trenches remained fresh, and neither nation had the appetite to start another global conflict over these new borders. If Germany was stronger than it had been in a generation, and the Allies were willing to look the other way, why didn't they stop? Risking this newfound stability over a border dispute with Poland reveals that long-term peace was never the objective. The leadership was committed to a policy of endless expansion. To understand the fatal choice of 1939, we have to look at how Berlin originally justified its aggressive moves. Early on, these territorial grabs were presented to the public and the West as simple corrections, reclaiming lands lost after the previous war. In 1935, the League of Nations mandate of the Saarland held a referendum to decide its future. Voters overwhelmingly chose to reunify with Germany, rather than remain independent or join France. This provided a significant propaganda victory. It framed the German government as popular and effective at reversing the nation's post-war decline through legitimate diplomatic means. Riding that momentum, the government dropped the pretense of disarmament. They openly announced the reconstitution of the army and the return of conscription, holding massive displays of forces banned by treaty. The next year, they pushed further. Troops marched back into the demilitarized zone of the Rhineland, an explicit violation of international agreements. The Allied response set a dangerous precedent. France had a much larger army nearby, but was struggling through an economic crisis, while the British government refused to risk a war over a region that wasn't vital to their own security. Because these early moves were framed as Germany simply returning to its own territory, the Western policy of appeasement seemed validated. Berlin learned that aggression carried no immediate consequences. By 1938, that strategy escalated. Germany moved from reclaiming lost fragments to absorbing entire neighboring states, beginning with the forced annexation of Austria. This move absorbed millions of new citizens and critical iron reserves. The Western powers, once again, took no action. The target then shifted to the Sudetenland region in Czechoslovakia. Berlin backed local political groups who used coordinated violence to demand the territory be ceded. Facing the threat of a wider conflict, Britain and France reached the peak of appeasement. They bypassed the Czechoslovakian government and forced Prague to hand the region over to German troops. The West made this concession based on an explicit promise from Berlin that its territorial demands were finally satisfied. That promise was shattered in early 1939. German forces rolled into the remaining Czech lands and issued a successful ultimatum for the territory of Memel. The mask of simply revising treaties had fallen away. The core ideology driving the state was Lebensraum, the pursuit of vast living space. Uniting German speakers was merely the opening move. The state ideology demanded the total dismantling of neighboring nations to secure their resources and establish permanent geopolitical hegemony over the continent. After 4 years of Allied acquiescence, a fatal assumption took root in Berlin, that British and French leaders were incapable of standing their ground. Confident in this belief, they targeted Poland, demanding control over the critical port city of Danzig. Warsaw refused. Danzig was essential for international trade. Handing it over would mean losing economic independence and trading exclusively through Germany. This map shows how German officials sabotaged negotiations. Contradictory demands ensured every pathway led to a dead end, securing a pretext for war. Returning one port city was irrelevant. The true plan was to erase Poland and incorporate its lands as living space. Berlin's confidence was solidified after signing a secret pact with the Soviet Union to divide Eastern Europe. With the Soviets as partners, the German leadership believed the risk of an Allied intervention had vanished. Believing they were calling a final bluff, German troops crossed the Polish border on September 1, 1939. That assumption was proven completely wrong. Within mere days, Britain and France declared war, refusing to tolerate the German leadership's fanatical ideology of endless expansion. By prioritizing conquest over the stable empire they had already won, they triggered a devastating global conflict that would ultimately cost them everything.